Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. After we have talked about the pillars and the obligations of the salawat, the 14 pillars and the 8 obligations, let's now in brief talk about the sunnah. And the sunnah are the best way, the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, and by that I mean that other than what we have mentioned, the 14 and the 8 that we mentioned, what is the best way of performing the prayer? And these are things that will not invalidate your prayer. These are the ways that you perfect your prayer, but will not invalidate. And with examples, I think this will be clear. First of all, there are two types of sunnah in the salah: in the saying or the utterance, and in the doing or the actions during the prayer. So the first, let's talk about some of the sayings of sunnah. For example, what would one say after the first takbirah and before you start the Fatiha? There is what we call the istiftah. Okay, so what to say there? For example, this is part of the sunnah. For example, saying "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim" before you start Surah Al-Fatiha. This is sunnah, meaning that if you don't say it, there is no harm. You don't have to make it up through two sajda, which is sujood as-sahu, or it will never invalidate your prayer. Okay. Another example is saying Ameen, for example, after the end of Surah Al-Fatiha. Also, another famous example of sunnah is to say or to recite another surah after Surah Al-Fatiha in the first two rak'ah of Dhuhr or Asr or Maghrib or Isha or Fajr or Salatul Eid or Salatul Kusuf or Salatul Jum'ah. Okay, those prayers which after Surah Al-Fatiha you need to recite another surah. That another surah is sunnah. Another way is, we have discussed in the wajibat, is after you raise from ruku' you say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. That is the wajib part. But the sunnah part, you can continue saying things like mil'u samawat wa mil'u al-ard wa mil'u ma shi'ta min shay'in ba'd, means, oh Allah, praising you as much as it would fill the heavens and the earth and all in between. So we just continue saying the magnitude of our prayers in some additional sayings, for example. Also, another famous sunnah is to say the Subhana Rabbil Azim 3 times. The one time is wajib, but more than that will become sunnah. Similarly, saying Subhana Rabbil A'la. Also, increasing from saying Rabbi Ghfirli in between the two sajda, saying something more. Allahumma ghfirli warhamni wa'afini wa'fu anni wajburni. Okay, you can continue that. Also, before the taslim, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. After you end the rukun part, okay, or what is required part, you can continue with some dua before. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhabi jahannam, min adhabi al-qabr, wa min fitnati al-mahya wal-mamat, wa min fitnati al-masih al-dajjal. You make some dua along those lines, seeking refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the hellfire, from the punishment in the grave, from all the trials and tribulations in our life and during our death, and also at the end of the time, like the Messiah, the false Messiah, the Dajjal's trial. All this type of dua we can make, which will become part of the sunnah. So these are some of the sayings, okay, sunnah that falls under the category of sayings. But there are sunnah that also can fall under the category of doings during the prayer. For example, raising the hands, okay, raising the hands at the time of the first takbirah. Okay, so if you don't raise the hands, just say Allahu Akbar like this by utterance. This is done. It has served the purpose of as a pillar, for example, for the first takbirah. But the raising the hand will become a sunnah. Also in the transitions, like when going to ruku, you say Allahu Akbar, you raise your hand and then go to ruku. Also when you come out of the ruku, Sami Allahu liman hamida. Okay. Another sunnah, for example, would be placing the right palm over, or the right hand over the left hand, and then you place it on your chest or below the navel, okay, belly button, for example, at the time of standing up, looking at the place of your sajda, putting the two hands, palms on the knees at the time of the ruku, placing enough gap between your thigh and the stomach at the time of sujood. So these are all activities, okay, actions that forms the sunnah, and these are the perfect ways that the Prophet ﷺ used to pray. And there are so many details which I don't want to go into them, but it is important to know. But inshallah, in a subsequent session, we'll go through the description of the prayer. After going into those particular three categories, we'll take a whole scenario of a prayer that is in a perfect way, inshallah, when we will describe the best way of the prayer, inshallah. But again, just to remind that these sunan are good to pray, to perform, to maintain. Allah will reward us, and there will be more reward. But if a person leaves some of them, then there is no harm in terms of he will not be held accountable, or the salah will not be invalidated. The last point that I would like to mention is that whenever there is such a thing like sunnah, for example, which we already came to know its definition, that there is no harm in living it. So if this is the case, then one should not be very strict on commanding from others to perform the sunnah, or hating each other because of the sunnah, or quarreling and disputing among the Muslims because of the sunnah. So this is the very intention of categorizing into pillars, wajibat and sunnah. The pillars, yes, of course, you can ask another brother if he is not performing the pillar, that you should perform the pillar, for example. The salah will be invalidated. But when there is a scope of sunnah, one should not really be very much strict on commanding on or imposing the sunnah on the others. And this is one of the ways the shaitan can enter to just create some kind of a dispute and division among the Muslims. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us one nation, one ummah, who knows the priority of the things. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.